Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I'm going to flip the Spellbinders September 2023 club kits, and as per usual I'll be featuring at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card in this video. This is a quick look at the 4 cards that I'll be making, and I am going to be crafting with the Better Press club kit, the small die of the month, large die of the month, 3D embossing folder of the month, clear stamp and die of the month, and the wax seal club kit. And so I'm really excited. This is going to be a long video, and that's why I do like to show my cards at the beginning, because if there's one that catches your eye and you want to skip straight to just that card, feel free. But this last pop-up card is a bit involved, so this video is going to be on the longer side. Let's make these. Okay, so let's start off with my flat card, and this is going to be a quick one because Better Press plates are really great for making flat cards. And to be honest, I could have just left this as it was. The panel is gorgeous. It's large. You don't even see all of it because I pressed it so that it would run off of 2 edges of my A2 panel. And the clip kit does also come with the sentiment press plate and a coordinating die to cut out that sentiment. And the sentiment's beautiful. It reads, "Thankful for everything you do." I did use a really nice, I really like this blue Better Press ink. It's really gorgeous. Now the thing with Better Press inks is that they are solvent-based dye inks, and I did splatter with a different ink, that the closest match I could find, because the Better Press inks are not water soluble, so you're not going to be able to actually splatter with them. And in fact, they are waterproof, so they're not going to mix with water. But my definition of a flat card isn't just strictly a just the card base, but rather your card base plus just one additional layer of cardstock and relatively flat embellishments. The idea being that I want my flat cards to be easy mailers, things that won't trigger extra postage due to weight or thickness. And one way to kind of reduce the number of layers of cardstock is to take your ink and swipe it directly onto your card base along all 4 edges, and that saves you a layer of cardstock, and it still gives you that really nice frame, that nice matte layer all the way around. So I thought that was a nice way to kind of make this panel just look a little bit extra special, and by using the exact same ink as I used to press the design, everything coordinates. Okay, so now onto my layered card. First off, I want to show some wax seal making. I definitely wanted to leave this in the video because I'm actually making this wax seal in a very, well, I've never seen it, so I can't say that I've like invented this. Maybe somebody out there has done it, but I just thought it would be kind of neat to try, and it actually turned out well. So I have the seal of the month on its head, essentially. So it's sitting on my surface, and I've poured wax onto it, and what I'm putting on top is one of the blank wax seals. It's a circle seal that has no design. It's completely flat. And I've got a second burner going with a second color ready to go. And once that seal design has cooled, I'm actually going to drop it into some more wax. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. You definitely, though, want to give it enough time to set and to cool. And as you can see, everything actually stuck together. So what I would recommend, though, don't do what I'm about to do, because I actually pried the wax off of the seal head, but you don't need to do that. And in fact, it's better if you don't because of the next step. And I was just really curious to see how it turned out, but I realized quickly that I should leave this in for the next step because it'll be a lot easier, especially if it is stuck to your seal design. So now I'm going to screw the handle in to the seal head, and I'm going to pour out another, like a second color, a nice contrasting color of wax. This is like a sort of yellow, a very yellowy gold. And I'm gonna drop this seal straight in. So it's already got my blue wax, and I'm gonna put that right into this puddle. And the result is going to be that I have a yellowish gold ring around the inner blue circle design. And I had so much fun. I'll show you this a couple more times, but it's so easy to do for one, and it's actually really really fun, neat effect. And so I'll be looking at my seals in a different way now, just to see, which designs lend themselves well to this look. And how I came up with the idea to try this is because the design of this seal, it does actually have an outer ring. And so that sort of made me think, how can I get that outer ring to be a different color? And this is what I came up with. So I'll do that again. And in fact, I'll probably show it a couple more times just because I'm just really fascinated by this. And so again, the seal design that I'm using, it's unscrewed from its handle and it's placed on my work surface, and it will sit nice and level just like that. I pour the first color of wax, and the thing that is a little bit of experimentation that you'll just have to play with is exactly how much wax to pour in, because you don't want that first puddle to be too much wax, because then you're not going to have a really nice ring all the way around the design. And you don't want it to be too little, because then it might not actually cover the design there. And what's hard to gauge is, how much of that wax is going to spread out once you put that blank wax seal on top of it to kind of push, because that will definitely push some of that wax out. So that's why I did, quite a few, and plus I wanted to experiment with blue in the center and the gold ring on the outside versus the yellow gold in the center and the blue ring on the outside. And as I mentioned, it does make it a lot easier if you leave the wax in the design if you can. And that can be hard to do. Sometimes it'll just pop out on its own. But otherwise, it's really easy and lots of fun to make these. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be looking at my other steel designs just to see, which ones will lend themselves well, because this does have that ring design built into the seal plate. It's really obvious that it's off a little bit. It's not completely centered, but I still think it's a pretty neat look. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And then the next idea that I wanted to share, and I definitely know I'm not the only one who's thought of this, is if you do have leftover wax, not enough for a complete seal, don't let that go to waste. You can just make dots. They're not enamel dots, they're basically wax dots, but they're really easy. They are so much easier to make than like a Nuvo drop, because it's going to be, perfectly rounded, and they'll dry in little to no time. And I even on a previous video of mine, I made black dots, and then I sprinkled a little bit of gold embossing powder, and it added these little flecks of gold that made it even more special. And so you can dress these dots up too and make them almost have that appearance of a glitter Nouveau drop, but there's actually no glitter. It's just like a little bit of embossing powder that you've sprinkled on top. And so it is a great way to get the most out of your wax and not have any of that go to waste. I mean, the wax already kind of, a little goes a long ways, but oh, the other thing that's really great, because I'm just noticing it, is that if something wasn't perfect for some reason, just remelt it. It's so easy to just remelt any dots that were misshapen and then just pour it again. So I really love that the wax seals are so forgiving and really easy. Like if you pressed a seal design and you didn't like how it turned out, you can just cut up that wax, remelt it, and try again. The only tricky parts, because I often like to mix multiple colors, is once you've mixed the colors, you are going to have a different color in the end. But otherwise, it doesn't really have to go to waste though, and it is fun to just mix your colors. So really, really cool. Now I've got the small die of the month in front of me here, and this is actually really neat. It's you can make shoes, kind of like boots with the laces and all of the detail that comes with it is fantastic. And the idea is that you can actually put these flowers and foliage coming out of these boots. And I just thought it was really cute. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of inspiration showing that, but when I saw this, the it wasn't immediately clear to me what it was. And in fact, the first thing that I thought it was actually a vase. So if you look at the die plate that's in the lower left-hand corner, those are the layers for your boots. But to me, that shape looks like a vase. And so I thought, let me just run with that idea. So there are a lot of dies here to create some different flowers, flower buds, foliage, leaves, etc. So what I've done is gone ahead and I'm just going to keep this really simple. I'm only using the one floral design. I think it's a daisy, maybe a Gerber daisy. And one die plate will have 2 die cuts, and I've layered 4 of them in 2 different shades of yellow. And I've assembled those 4 layers together to make a nice full flower. And I took one of the wax dots that I created and used that as the center of my flower. Then I've used the set of nested notched frames, notched corner frames, I think is what they're called, and just created a nice backdrop for me to arrange my flowers. Now the boot, as it was, I've die cut that out of vellum, so it might be a little bit hard to see right now. And so, but I die cut it out of vellum to give it sort of that look of maybe like a frosted glass vase. And I took one of my seals and I put that on my vase just as part of maybe the design of the vase. And so that's also going to serve as a spot to hide the glue, because anytime you glue down vellum, wherever you have that glue, it's going to alter the look of your vellum. It's going to make it look a little bit different. There are ways around that, but one of the easy ways to hide where you place adhesive on your vellum is to put something on top, and then you can put your glue or your adhesive behind any parts of the vellum that have been covered. And so that's another purpose that the seal is serving. And it's kind of cool because the seal design really mimics a lot of the flowers and the foliage that you can use from the small die of the month. And so I'm just gonna arrange a couple of flowers, and I was gonna keep it like really simple with just the one single flower, but I just couldn't stop at that. So I added a second flower, and then I felt like I needed even more on top of that. So I'm die cutting one of the stems that it has. I think it can be used as maybe holly berries, but I've die cut the little berries out of white to make it more like baby's breath. So that is my layered card. Now onto my interactive card, and I'm starting with my 3D embossing folder, which I will do some faux letter pressing. So I'm going to ink up the folder, and I'm gonna add a couple, another color to this and just use my blending brush to mix the two, just to soften anywhere that is kind of overlapping. Also, that just helps to not cross-contaminate my ink pads, or at least to minimize it. And then I'm going to run this through my machine to emboss it. I did ink up the raised side, so what I'll end up using is the deboss side of this panel. So the side that has the impression that is put into the card, not the side where the design is raised above the card. So you always have the option to use either the embossed side, which is raised, or the debossed side, which is depressed. And for this one, I just decided that I think I want the look of that debossed side. And this is a really lovely 3D embossing folder. It has a lot of mushrooms, some leaves and foliage, and it's kind of fun. I like it a lot. And what I'll make for my interactive card today is an infinity shaker card, or I think it's also called a full front shaker card. And you can buy shaker pouches that help you to do this, but I have a lot of acetate, so I don't find the need to really buy those, because it is pretty easy to make yourself. You just need to cut a bit of acetate that is about an inch wider and an inch taller than your card. And so in my case, I'm making a USA 2 size card. So I've cut my acetate to roughly, instead of 4 1/4 wide, which is the width of my card, 5 1/4 is what I cut my acetate to. And instead of the 5 1/2 height of my card, I've cut my acetate to 6 1/2. And then what I'll do is just score roughly 1/2 inch on all 4 edges. And that's going to be essentially the pouch that will be my full front shaker. So the panel that I embossed is the full size of my card front, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I find that it's helpful to score your acetate in order to fold it and get nice straight lines. But if you wanted, you could always just rest your card panel on top of your acetate and use the edge of your card panel to fold the edges up and over, and then seal it. Or I'm going to use some double-sided adhesive to adhere those glue tabs, those 1/2 inch glue tabs, to the back of my panel. Before I do that, though, I had another thought, because the clear stamp of the month, there's the option to get it by itself, just the stamp set, which is a 4x6 stamp set, but then you also have the option of getting it with the coordinating dies. And the coordinating dies usually almost always. But I think there's only been like a couple of occasions where this isn't true. But usually it has coordinating dies to cut everything out, and that includes the sentiments, which I've really grown to appreciate having coordinating dies for the sentiments. But originally my thought was, well, I'll just stamp, color, and die cut the stamped image separately onto another piece of cardstock. But I had a different idea and I thought I would just run with it. So I would actually recommend, instead of doing what I'm doing here, go ahead and stamp out your design onto your acetate before you start attaching it to your panel, especially if you are embossing your panel, because now there's different, it's not a flat surface anymore, so it might be hard to get a really full inked impression. And I did find it a little challenging to get this design to ink up perfectly, because I'm actually stamping onto an embossed onto my acetate, but behind my acetate is the embossed panel. But I did manage, and so what I'll do is actually do a bit of it's a little bit of a stained glass look. I'm using my alcohol markers and I'm coloring in that stamped image, but from the back side. So I stamped on the front of the acetate with StazOn ink. That's a solvent-based ink. And if you were to color on top of that with a medium that is solvent-based, like your alcohol markers, you're going to actually move those lines. But by coloring from the back side, I get all of that nice color and the lines don't move at all. So it's a really fun technique, and because alcohol inks are translucent, it's pretty cool to color onto acetate, and that's why it gives you a little bit of that stained glass or faux stained glass look, because it is still clear. So your inks are going to look a little bit different when you're coloring onto clear acetate. They're just not going to be quite as like saturated, but they're still very vibrant. I just found that the lighter the color, the less kind of visible it was. The other thing that's a little bit different when you're coloring onto something like acetate, which is not, it's a non-porous substrate, so the alcohol doesn't actually soak into the that substrate in the same way that it would soak into paper, for example. And so it actually moves and glides across the acetate in a very different way. So blending is very different on when you're doing alcohol marker coloring on your something like acetate. It just takes playing around with it a little bit and just getting whatever look you're going for. I did try to do a little bit of blending, but I wasn't really going for anything super realistic. I never really am in with my coloring, but I knew for sure I wasn't really going to get that sort of three color blend of the dark, mid, and the light. But I love how it turned out. It's still very, vibrant, and it still has some dimension. And what I love about Infinity Shaker cards is you can add a lot of shaker bits to it. And what I've done is I've just mixed up a variety of different brands, different colors of sequins and confetti to make my own little mix here, a nice sort of autumn mix of all the same colors that I used to color with. So some of the orange, the yellows, the browns. And my idea was that those different colors of sequins and confetti would kind of be a little bit reminiscent of fall leaves falling down. And so that was sort of what I was going for. And it's a lot of fun to make these shaker cards because it's so easy to do, and it's a lot of fun to really load it up with all of those shaker bits. And of course, it wouldn't be a card for me if it didn't have a last minute scramble for where to put the sentiment. And so, what I thought I would do is just do some white heat embossing of the one of the sentiments that comes in this stamp set. And I wanted to still keep the fall colors going, and so I thought I would heat emboss onto some orange cardstock just to keep the spirit of fall. The stamp set actually has quite a few sentiments that are really, really nice. So you've got Happy Thanksgiving, thankful for your thoughtfulness, which I really love. I'm thankful for a friend like you, which is also a fabulous sentiment, and happy fall. And that's the one I went with because my card is just so fall themed, and so I thought that would really work perfectly. And the other stamped image that comes in this stamp set is a pumpkin surrounded by some branches and leaves. So that's another one that's really good for maybe like a border design as well. So like a bottom border design, I think it might look really nice. And so the last finishing touch for this card is just going to be to attach that sentiment onto the card front. Usually dry adhesives for me work best on acetate because it is non-porous, but if all you have is a liquid adhesive on hand, then I think that'll work just fine as well. Okay, so now let's get to that pop-up card. And this is called an interlocking accordion fold card. Before I get into the card, let me show you the die set that I'm going to be crafting with. It's the large die of the month, and it's really awesome. It has cupcakes, and included in the club kit set are decorations for your cupcakes that are fall and Halloween themed, which I think is awesome. I love that. But what I was very attracted to was the fact that this month's add-on is for the large die of the month. And the add-on includes a lot of elements that you can use for other holidays throughout the year, one of which is Christmas. And so if you've ever seen any of my videos, you probably already know I'm kind of big on what I call, what my goal is for my holiday, especially holiday card making, is to get onto the coveted mantle of the card recipient. Because, mantles, they are only so wide, and you can't put every single card you get on top of the mantle sometimes. And so sometimes it's quite a competition to get onto that mantle. And so my goal is always to create what I've been calling mantle-worthy cards. And this card for sure is one of those that has that big wow factor, because when you open it up, it's so big and there's so much to it. So that's why I decided I wanted to do a holiday card. So I did pull in a couple of extra things. I did pull in the I think it was July's club kit, maybe also the large club kit that had the stocking with the gnome and gingerbread. So that's where I got the gingerbread cookie. And everything else is from the add-on. So the candies, the Santa hat, the snowman. Technically, I see it as as a like a Hershey's Kiss piece of chocolate. But I think that's technically the head for maybe a duck for Easter. And then also included in that add-on set are some different hearts for Valentine's Day, and there might be something else for another holiday. I'm not sure. I was just very focused on what I could use for Christmas. So now this card, as I mentioned, it's called an interlocking accordion card. And I have made this a couple of different ways, and other tutorials that you may find on YouTube here make it differently still. I adapted this to actually work for 8.5 by 11 card instead of the other tutorials that I learned this card style from, which used 12 by 12 cardstock. I just figured not everybody has 12 by 12, so I decided to adapt it. Now, I'll throw up on screen the measurements for these pieces. So my top two pieces, the one on the left is 8 by 5.5, and you score that at 4 inches along that 8-inch edge. The right hand side is 8.5 by 5.5, and you want to score that along the 8.5-inch edge at 4 and 8. The red pieces on the left is 8 by 3.25, score that at 2.5 and 5. And then the second one is 8.5 by 3.5, and you want to score that at 1/2 inch, 3.5, and 6. All of those 1/2 inch, really there's just two, but the two 1/2 inch sections, those are glue tabs. So I've just mitered off the corners where I've cut from the score line out to the edge of that 1/2 inch glue tab just to remove a small triangle of cardstock. That helps things so that if you don't have it lined up 100% perfect, it doesn't matter. It's a lot less noticeable. Now for these red pieces, you want to make sure that all of the sections actually mirror each other. That's why I'm holding it in this way, because the two sections that are closest to where those two red strips attach, those two sections actually measure 3 inches wide, while the two sections to the left and right of those only measure 2.5 inches wide. So they are not all equal, and you want to make sure that everything is mirrored or symmetrical so that it all folds down nice and flat. Now, with the two white panels, I am going to cut an aperture through the center. You just want to make sure that whatever shape die you use, that it's tall enough for that red strip to pass through it. And so in this case, my red strip measures 3.25 tall. So I want to make sure that my aperture will be taller than 3.25, so that red sort of accordion strip will be able to pass through that aperture and create that illusion of an interlocking card. Now I have that piece, that white panel, it is actually folded in half, and I am cutting through both layers. So both strips that I cut out of white, you want to do the same thing. You want to cut an aperture out of the center through both layers. And in fact, if you want to come back to my channel a little bit later today, I actually have another video coming out where I've made this card again, but a slightly simpler version. So if you want to see a simpler version, then you can check out that video. And if I know that this is a pretty involved fun fold, and so if folks are interested, I can actually film a third video just by itself, this one, and maybe take it even slower. But I'll try to be as comprehensive in this video as possible. Now, all of these strips that we have, they need to follow that concertina or accordion fold, where you have a valley fold followed by a mountain fold followed by a valley fold. That sort of zigzag is what allows all of this to ultimately fold down relatively flat. This is going to be a pretty thick card. So this is polar opposite from a flat card. This ends up being very, very thick, kind of the sort of card that you might want to hand to somebody in person, maybe even put into an envelope box. And or if you do need to ship it, maybe the sort of card that you ship along with a present, and it actually will go into a box as opposed to just an envelope. But with my mats and layers, I am going to cut these to 3 3/4 wide by 5 1/4 tall. Folded, the card is going to end up measuring 4 inches wide by 5 1/2 tall, so just shy of USA 2. Now to kind of transfer the aperture to my pattern paper, which I want to add as a matte layer on top of these frames, what I'm doing, we're looking at the back side. So I'm just temporarily taping down my pattern paper to the back of the aperture panel of the frame, I should say, that has the aperture that I want, and lining that up so that it's nice and centered. And then I'll take the exact same die that I used to cut my original aperture out of this panel here, and I'm going to nestle that right in until it sort of locks into place, and I will just run it through my die cutting machine, just as you see it here. I'm not going to try to remove the white cardstock, and it'll still cut through just fine. Because it only still needs to cut through the one layer, even though there's that second layer of thickness. It should pass through just fine. If it doesn't, you can always take it out, and at the very least, it'll deboss a line that will make it easy to line up. So I've gone ahead and done that with all 4 of these frames that I have here. And then I'll attach these two. So I've got that, originally it was a 1/2 inch glue tab, but I did need to trim it down a little bit just so that it's not visible beyond the frame. And so I've glued that together to make a single long strip. Okay, now back to my red strip. I am going to start decorating. And if you know exactly what you want to do, you can do all of your decorating before you start attaching this to your card base. But what I wanted to do was actually at least get the first layer adhered. So I've got these white panels just to leave a little bit of a red border all the way around. But I wanted my cupcakes to actually kind of stand out a little bit better. So I wanted to put them against a backdrop that was nice and neutral. And I'm going to sort through some pattern papers to just figure out what I'd like to be the backdrop behind this red panel here that will be visible within that aperture. And so I'm just going to dig through my paper pad. It's great to work with a paper pad because then everything inside is going to coordinate. And so I've picked out this really nice blue. It works really well with everything else. And I'll just trim this down so that it is just a smidge, maybe about 1/4 of an inch all the way around, wider and taller than the aperture. That way it covers the aperture completely and is a nice backdrop, because that's going to be what I attach the red strip to. And you might have noticed that this card is so thick that there's actually a ribbon that I've laced through it to actually, keep it closed. And so what I need to do is actually create some room for this ribbon to actually um, slide through, because when the accordion card is folded shut, there's going to be a lot of slack in the ribbon so that you can tie a bow and keep it nice and closed. But when you stretch out the accordion, that ribbon needs to stretch along with it. And so that means that the ribbon can't actually be adhered down to anything. And so that's why I've put some foam on the back of just the one panel on both opposite ends of this red strip here, because everything else needs to be floating. It's not going to be attached to anything. But I've left gaps. And in particular, my ribbon's going to go through the gap that's in the center. So that's why the foam is there. It's just to leave some room for my ribbon to pass through, and that way there's not too much tension holding it down, and that'll keep it nice and easy to open and close. Now, when you glue this panel down, you do need to leave a gap on the two ends where the ribbon needs to pass through, in between that blue layer and the frame. So don't put a line of glue all the way down both sides. Leave a gap in the center where it's not glued down. And that's where your ribbon can pass through. So you can see I've laced the ribbon behind the frame and in front of that blue panel. And then again, out the other end, it goes behind the frame. And so you want to do this on both this end as well as on that far left-hand end. We're going to aim to do the exact same thing. And the ribbon in the center will be hidden by the red strip. And that's why there's going to be I'm gonna have to aim to get the ribbon such that it's actually falling in the gap between my foam pieces here. So just if you try to center everything, it makes it a little bit easier to guesstimate. But the reason why I put a little bit of liquid adhesive is so that if I needed, I could lift it up a little bit, nudge it around. Be sure to wiggle your ribbon, make sure it's not actually getting glued down by that foam. You want to make sure your ribbon can still slide and still move. That way you can pull it taut when you go to close or tie your card shut. But then when you untie the bow and stretch this out, the ribbon can still slide and move, and it has enough slack to be able to open everything up. So I've attached my back panel, that light blue panel behind my frame, on that leftmost panel. And then I'm going to thread my ribbon through again. And I took it out completely and threaded it through because it has, I didn't know how long I needed the ribbon to be. So I wanted to keep it still attached to the spool and pull it as far as I needed to, in order to still be able to have enough ribbon when this was closed to tie a bow, but also when it's fully stretched out to be able to open this as widely as I wanted. So here on that left side, you can see the exact same thing as on the right that I showed earlier. That ribbon is threaded behind the frame and in front of that blue panel, and we're gonna hide it with this red panel that gets adhered to it. And that ribbon, I'm aiming for that ribbon to be to line up in the gap and not actually get glued down anywhere. So we've made a channel essentially for that ribbon to just slide. And then once you have that in place, you can just cut your ribbon to length. Just make sure, like I mentioned, that you have enough ribbon so that when the card is folded down flat, that you have enough to tie a bow. And then when it's opened and stretched out, that there's enough slack in the ribbon so that it can open as widely as you want it. And then the rest is just decorating. I might actually edit out a lot of the decorations because you saw me create them. So all that's left is to decorate the front of the card and to add or glue the different cupcake elements into those panels that are on that red strip. And so that is our card base pretty much complete. All I did was added a layer of craft cardstock to the back and to the front of the card as a way to kind of hide that light blue layer, because I was conservative. I didn't want to use the full panel, and I knew I wanted to kind of keep that gingerbread man look on the outside of the card as well. So I wanted to bring some of that craft color to the outside. And so then, as I mentioned, all that's left is to actually decorate. And you can, as you're putting your elements onto your panels, they can stretch or extend beyond those red panels a little bit, but they do still need to be, able to kind of pass through that aperture that you've cut. So that's sort of the limiting factor. You don't want to attach anything that's going to extend too far above your red panel to where your card won't close or open, because it kind of snags on the openings of those apertures. But otherwise, there's a lot of room to decorate. There's a lot of space for different sentiments. I reserved one panel to stamp a sentiment, but you can also leave a panel to actually write your message too, if you wanted. I figured I'm going to write my message on the back. That way, if this is on display, it just shows what I've designed, and I don't have the best handwriting, so I don't want my handwriting on display. I'd rather have this really nice stamped sentiment and all of these really cute cupcakes and the little accessories for the holidays on display. And you can see stretched out how long it actually is, because it does end up being 16 inches in total if you were to stretch it out flat, but it's still going to keep a little bit of that accordion shape, so it won't quite be the full 16 inches on display. So here is a final look at the 4 cards that I made today. I have I still have the Glimmer of the Month that I want to craft with, and as well I have the Quick and Easy card kit of the month to craft with as well. So look forward to those videos coming up soon. And of course, all of my videos where I feature Spellbinders products will be in my Spellbinders playlist. And so you can always check out my playlist to see all of those videos. And I'm not sure which my favorite card is, but I am really loving the pop-up card quite a bit. I might have to make a Halloween version as well because there are so many fun Halloween images and die cuts that come in the large um, club kit, large die of the month. I was also thinking that the envelope of wonder add-ons, I've been eyeing the Halloween and the Christmas one, and I'm wondering scale-wise if those elements would work really well as decorations for these cupcakes too. So that might be another thing to play with as well. And so all the more reason for me to now get those additional add-ons to the envelope of wonder. If you have a favorite card out of this set of four, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for joining me on this one, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.